Now, just to give you a little bit of an overflow, a chart, I actually asked Dr. Michael Smith. I just got back yesterday or day before from Dallas, Texas, ministering there at Dallas Theological Seminary. There was no pressure because Chuck Swindoll spoke the previous time, so they said, "Don't worry, you're yeah, sure." You know, I also was able to meet with the faculty and staff and take the Bible conference for a church that I really received a lot from. How many of you remember Dwight Pentecost, Dr. Pentecost? Yeah, Things to Come, you know, prophecy and all that. That's his church that he pastored for many years, Grace Bible. And also Charles Ryrie, who taught us. He was boring, actually. But anyway, amazing theologian. But we used to tease him, Dr. Dryrie, you know. But anyway, so that was the church, and Warwood and other things. So it was good to be there. I ate too many briskets, and so I think, did I lose your concentration now? I was suffering for Jesus in that. No. Now, what Dr. Smith put together, I said, "Amen, can I use this? It's so good." Where does our chapter fit? Chapter 3 fits in that blue Job's lament. Okay? So you have speeches that come after that. There's 1 cycle, 2 cycles, 3 cycles, and there's 3 of his friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, and then Job responds to that. Now at the end, Job comes at the end in response, and Job starts with a lament, ends with a response. Then we're going to see later there's dialogues where Job concludes he wants to take God to court. Then a young fellow called Elihu comes, and he kind of puts in his 2 pence worth of knowledge or whatever. God challenges, Job responds, and then eventually he's challenged again, and Job repents. Eventually, God rebukes his friends for wrongdoing, which means God gives a thumbs up to Job, and then he restores his fortune. I like this because I kind of do brain mapping diagrammatically. This is a good flow to see how the book of Job unveils. And where we are actually here in Job's lament. We finished this. If you notice, the blue and blue here is what they call prose. You know, there's dialogical. The narrator is telling us a story. But from chapter 3, which we now begin, it starts in poetry, in the lament and in the wisdom tradition. These are laments. Now, maybe 2 or 3 things about poetry. Why do people resort to poetry? And what are the advantages of poetry, particularly for the theme of suffering and trying to reconcile God's justice and love in the midst of it? What is poetry? What advantage does poetry have?
It's easy to remember.
Okay, the rhyme could be, okay. But I must confess, Hebrew poetry is not simply like a limerick, you know, A, B, B, C, A kind of thing. Doesn't rhyme like that. But yes, there is this flow that has some amount of recollection. Okay, anyone else? Yes?
You get poetic license so you can describe things in crazy ways.
Oh, crazy. Okay. I mean, you can actually engage your imagination. Rather than pure academic rigor and analytical skills, poetry gives you a certain license where faith and imagination can flourish. You can paint a picture rather than just, you know, telling them once upon a, you know, the dry scene. What else? The advantage of poetry. Come on, I'm sure there's some English lit. Yes, sir.
I think also your audience, it's not so specifically directed. It gives you wisdom, but it doesn't necessarily come right at you as an individual unless you let it.
Okay, very good. It actually has wider application, and it can either clarify through pictures or it can leave ambiguous so anybody can relate to it. That open and yet available means is poetic. I want to give you 2 other reasons why poetry is important and sometimes necessary. Poetry has what they call in Hebrew parallelism. In other words, you can say something in one way, and then you can say the same thing but in another way, and it kind of reinforces. Or you can say something that this is what it is, you can go to the next line and say it is not. And so it gives you another way of saying, you flip the coin over, you okay, I get it. The second thing about poetry that's helpful is what they call personification. Now, what is personification? This is attributing to things that are inanimate or no life, giving them personality. For example, wisdom cries out in the street. So you see wisdom like a lady, yay, you know, like, oh, that. You say the night. In our chapter, you're going to hear the night closing its eyelids. Like, can you imagine? I mean, doesn't night have an eye and closes it? But it kind of makes it graphic and figurative, and that way you personify something. Like even Jesus came full of grace. He was the grace of God, embodied in a person. They could have just said, you know, he's a very nice guy. But he said, grace appeared in Christ. That means as though grace is taken on a human form that can talk and walk and care and heal. And you're like, oh, that's what grace looks like. Because something that's abstract is given what they call anthropomorphism, parts of a body. So you can say, okay, this is how it works. Is this clear? So I think it's a very good literary device to use, especially when you're studying suffering. How do you explain to somebody what pain is? But when Job cries out and he says, I curse the night that my parents, actually consummated my birth. I mean, that's pretty graphic. But you know what he's hinting at? He's going into this with severe things. All right. Now, for our lesson, we're going to go into what I'm calling this section, honest to God. Honest to God. Do you use that expression? I know the Brits use it all the time. I mean, honest to God, So, do you use it here also in the U.S.? Yeah, honest to God. I like that expression. In our culture, particularly the Western culture, juxtapose the ancient Near Eastern culture, we teach children, we grow up, we have etiquettes that says you don't be critical about someone else. Don't complain. What are you crying about? Isn't it, even as kids, our parents tell them, stop complaining. You're whining. That's it. So maybe we don't understand chapter 3 with its impact. I just want you to know, in like Psalm 106, which is what they call an imprecatory psalm, lament, L-A-M, lament is a tradition where God invites us to ventilate. Now, you say, Dr. G, I thought you said this is the theme of friendship. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. One of the qualities of a friend is someone in whose presence you can what? You can ventilate. You can share your heart. They're not going to be critical about your words and what you said. What did you exactly mean? It's not the right order. You better watch your mouth. They're like, it's okay. I want to show you at the end of this that ultimately God is a friend like that. God allows us. I don't think he approves it, but he allows us. It's okay. Tell me, Job, how do you feel? I wish he said that, but he doesn't. He keeps quiet, and that's why Job gets agitated at his intensity. He gets like mad all the time. And just like me and Dorothy, you know. It's just like when I ask her something, she doesn't say something, I ask louder. And if she doesn't fight back, it really bothers me. I mean, sometimes I ask her something, she say, Chris, if you feel that's what we should do, it's fine. I don't like that. You know, it's like, say yes or no, you know. Because that puts the onus on me. If she fights, then I can, I have some ammunition to hit back. But when someone says, that's okay, what do you mean? Tell me more. I don't like that tell me more stuff. I said it all. I mean, now what are you saying? So you can see God in this section, and it's painful because till chapter 28, God doesn't say anything. Job's making a lot of accusations, and he is actually in this chapter going to do exactly what Satan said. You watch and see. He is going to what? What did he tell God? Satan said, if you took all this from Job, he is going to turn around and do what? Curse you. What does his wife tell him? And actually, Job does enter. He moves from accusation to actually a form of cursing. Every time you read in that first 10 verses, let this happen to me, let the night shadow, let the day never happen, let the clouds cover. That's a form of cursing. But I've qualified as we read this chapter, cursing is not just like a 4-letter bad word that people shout and, that's not what cursing is. Cursing in that ancient Near Eastern tradition is that your voice and your mouth can pronounce evil or invoke evil spirits that has effect on people. So cursing and blessing are powerful, almost magical manipulators in the pagan culture. So you got to keep that in mind when you see what's happening in this chapter. So let me read this chapter and then comment a few things, and then we have a whole slate of questions for us tonight to discuss. Job and chapter number 3. After this, I like that word, after, or then, afterward, after all that. I mean, Job has sat on that garbage dump, on the ash heap outside the city. He's taken a piece of pottery, you remember that? And he's scraping off the pus. He had some kind of a leprous, cancerous disease that was just all over him. He was so bad that when his closest friends come, they don't even recognize him. He's like, is this Job? And you know what they do for 7 days? What do they do for 7 days? Say nothing. They just sit with him in silence. After that, then Job breaks his silence. He opened his mouth, and what does he do, class? He cursed the day of his birth. Cursed birthday to me. Sorry. Can you believe? The guy is not happy. He curses the day of his birth. And Job said, and here we can see the poetry roll, let. Every time you see the word let, it's a form of curse coming out of it. May this be. May you never get your grades. May your toenails grow inward. No, people curse and all kinds of funny things. When people are hurting and they are angry or they are suffering, they are rationally disengaged, but the mouth is in gear. Have you met people like that? Their mouth is in gear and their mind is in neutral. They don't know what they're saying, but they're like, I got to get this out. And later on, they regret it. I know there's no one like that in Heritage, but in other church, no. He says, let the day perish on which I was born, and the night that said, a man is conceived. This declaration, it's similar to what we would say, it's a boy. You remember that in the hospital when someone says, hey, it's a boy. He says, cursed be that person who said it's a boy. He doesn't like that. You could imagine to what an estate he's come, that everything that is a word of blessing, a greetings, anything that brings good news, he's like, may that have never happened. I mean, hold on, it gets worse. Again, you see another let. Let the day be what? Darkness. May God above not seek it, nor light shine upon it. What he's saying is, I don't know if it's good English, but he's now talking about may things be uncreated. Can it be uncreated? I mean, how do you uncreate something that God said, let there be light? He says, I wish God never said that. Ooh. Verse 5, let gloom and deep darkness claim it. Instead of light, let those darkness, let clouds dwell upon it. Let the blackness of the day terrify these things that are light. That night, he said, let thick darkness seize it, let it rejoice among the days of the year. No, let it not rejoice among the days of the year. You know what he's saying? May I have been born on February the 30th. Some of you didn't get it. Okay. There's no February 30th. I mean, he's saying, I wish it never happened. That's what he's saying. Let it not come into the numbers of the month. Behold, let the night be barren. Let no joyful cry enter it. Let, those curse it who curse the day. Those who are ready to rouse it up. And he uses the word, here the word Rahab. which is this is the sea monster in the ancient culture, Leviathan, and we talk more about it. God also brings back this sea monster dinosaur back. Let the stars of the dawn be dark, let it hope for light, but have none, nor let the eyelids of the morning, see that word? Eyelids of the morning. It took him 9 verses. 9 verses because you're like, Job, why do you want this? It took him 9 verses, and now on verse 10 he says, because, I was wondering you're going to give me a reason why you're cursing everything around you. He says, because it did not shut the doors of my mother's womb. In other words, he's saying, I wish my mother would never get pregnant. Nor hide troubles from my eyes. Why did I not die at birth, come out of the womb and expire? He's praying for a stillborn case. Why wouldn't I have just born dead instead of being born alive, go through this, and end up here in this hashi? Why did the knees receive me? Again, or why did the breast of that should nurse me? You know what he's saying? In that culture, I mean, there were no hospitals, as you could imagine, where we are. The common practice was, midwives. You know, they come to midwives, right? To deliver midwives. And he's saying, you know what he's saying literally? When my mother delivered me, I wish the midwife just dropped me and let me die instead of, I mean, that's pretty graphic, isn't it? So why did my mother take her to her breast and feed me? I should have just died there instead of now facing this. For I, he says, if that's the case, would have lain down and been quiet. I would have slept, and then I would have been in rest. You know what he's saying? R.I.P. I wish I'd just been dead. Then I don't have to feel anything, especially what I'm going through. A few things. We'll pause there in the first 13 verses, and I want to raise a few questions and intertwine it with a few thoughts for our discussion. So instead of going through the lecture and discussing at the end, I'll look at the first part and do some discussion and thought. Let me say, Job comes to a point when he says, I wish God didn't allow me to be born, but besides that, this God who's allowed me has actually put this hedge around me. You remember who else said God has put a hedge? Satan did. You remember that? When Satan went to God and said, I know why I can't mess with him. You put a hedge around the guy. You protected him. But notice what Job does. There's a play on words here. The same thing that God used to protect Job from harm and danger. Job says, you actually hedged me in, and I'm like now stuck in this prison with thorns all around me. I can't get out of this suffering. You see what I'm saying? The same hedge that kept away enemies from touching Job. Job flips it over and says, I am enclosed with this fence, and I'm suffering, and I'm going to sink, and I can't even get out of this because you put this hedge around me. It's very interesting. Perspectives are so important. I am learning to ask 2 sets of questions. Not just, how can I get out of this? But also, what can I get out of this? Let me say that again. Many of us, when suffering comes, we want an exit strategy. You know what I'm talking about? Easy way out. Let's get out. What's that? Give me a chill pill or something. I need to get out of this. Piper actually has written a book saying, don't waste your suffering and sorrows. We can do that. God sends these things in our lives, and instead of saying, how can I get out? Ask God, what can I get out from it? God's protection. Job does 2 things. He bemoans himself. This is the lowest form of self-degradation. And he is just tired and fed up. And he's looking for someone to blame. And he doesn't know who to blame. So he blames God, Creator. You only brought me into the world if you hadn't. And everything about God's creation, he's mad at. So 2 questions to begin with. When you and I are depressed, and I'm not talking, maybe some of you feel, oh, I'm talking about, some serious clinical depression that you're losing your bearings on life or something. No, all of us get down, don't we? I do. A lot of times, I feel very down and out from anything. But sometimes as the head of my family, as a husband, as a father, I put up this smile, this, facade and outside that everything's fine. Many of us come to church like that. Why? Because Sunday morning I dressed up, looking nice. I got to put a smile for my kids who are going to Sunday school. I wonder whether from this chapter you see these 2 tendencies. Do you have the tendency to suppress your emotions and hurts? Or do you have a place or people to whom you can express that same hurt? What's the advantage of each? What's the disadvantage and caution for both? Any thoughts? I mean, I'm not saying it's you, so you don't have to feel bad, but you know people who, when they are depressed, they never share it with anybody. I've got 2 daughters. One of my daughters just suffers in silence. And I'm like, why didn't you tell us? And she's like, that's okay, Dad, I'm fine, I'll be okay. I said, you could have told your mother. Of course, the other one, I'm telling you, all the neighbors should know her toe is hurting. And I was like, come on. So you have these extremes. Which do you think is better? To suppress your hurts and feelings or just to express it?
Well, expressing is better because if you suppress them, it causes health problems eventually.
Okay, so there is a form where you can bottle in your emotions to the extent it becomes counterproductive to your well-being. That stress builds up into a certain kind of, and then it's irrevocable. Very good. All right. Well, what about the problem if you keep expressing it? My other daughter. Is that a problem? Very good. I mean, don't forget what you're doing to others. I mean, one of the things, and I'm not against male or female, please don't make a feminist issue over this, but I really think that God made mums in a way that they can take a lot more. They not only grieve and are more sensitive, but they also learn with heavy chest and heart to put up with a lot of stuff. Am I right? Generally speaking, is that true? I really think so. So even when you express yourself, I think you need to know to whom and when and why and where. Some people don't know who to say it to. Everybody comes down the hallway, they kick the door. Like, what do you think? I mean, it's like the guy hit the wife hit the children hit the dog hit the cat hit the, I mean, poor mice, what is he going to hit, So you just pass that down. I think that's a good thing to remember. The second thing I ask, and maybe you can talk a little about it, why is it during times of suffering we enter into this realm of self-pity? Isn't that true? The strongest of people, like Elijah on Mount Carmel, something happens and Jezebel gets him and he goes and looks for a juniper tree and he says, I wish I was dead. Kill me. I'm the last prophet. And God says, oh, sorry, wrong number. There are a few others who haven't bowed their knee to Baal, isn't it? But why is it that we resort to deep self-pity? Why do people who are suffering a lot eventually feel pity for themselves? They just close up or clam up.
They're blinded to anybody else's issues at that point.
They're what?
Blinded to anybody else's issues.
Okay. They're blinded to other people's issue. There's so much, it's all about me. Okay. What else?
Forget.
Pardon?
Forget
Forget, very good, but what?
who they are and who God is, because the pain or what is you're going through is so overwhelming. You have to constantly remind yourself about God.
Very good. They become very introspective because they forget the blessing of God, both from behind and above them. Very true. Why else?
You think like Elijah, he almost sounded like an emotional crash. He was so high on the mountain, not only physically, but emotionally, spiritually, that when it was all over, down he went.
Okay, here again you oscillate from extremes, isn't it? Yeah, and the same thing with Jesus. Baptism, heaven open. Next thing we know, he's in the wilderness, tempted by. And life's like that, kind of in and out, cyclonic. Very good.
I think they tie in the first question that you asked and the second one in the fact that people don't share because nobody will understand. They enter self-pity. Nobody will understand my problem. Opening up, you find out maybe someone else who has either experienced it can share insight into how they dealt with it.
That's your friend in grief. He doesn't have anybody else he knows that's in grief that he can talk to.
Well, thank you for that. My brother was sharing with me. I told you last week I lost one of the early members of our church. I planted in India. And Vijay was ready when Prema, his wife, passed away. In fact, he prayed that God will take her. And you need people, it's grief shares, isn't it, the program? Yep. I mean, yeah, to show solidarity with them. I also think the point that sometimes you tell people and you eventually wonder, who cares? Have you felt like that? I mean, honestly, what's the point of going and telling people? What are they going to do about it? Or can they reverse the situation? Or is it going to get worse or better if I told that person who gossips? You know what I'm saying? So people, the other thing I feel is, how many of you have been like once bitten, twice shy? You share your heart and then someone, you're like, you know what, I don't think I'm going to do that again. So I see there's many reasons why people resort to either suppress the reality of their pain, or that's like kind of the denial mode, or they express it in the sense they hurl instead of hiding, the extremes. In this chapter, I think, not to lessen the sacredness of Scripture, but I think the writer is also using Job's lament as a literary trigger. You know what a trigger is? Someone doesn't say something, you kick okay, say something now, I think their friends have been quiet for how long? 7 days, they haven't said anything. Now Job is ventilating. Guess what's going to happen the next 30 chapters? These guys are going to defend God, tell the guy why he's suffering, and now they start opening their mouths. When they didn't open their mouths, they were comforters. When they did, they were miserable comforters. If you have friends who are miserable, and they basically rub salt into his wounds. And you'll see that when we come. So anyway, that's an important discussion question for us. Now the second part I want to read, and then I have another slate of questions for us. So doing it a little bit, changing the style of our study today. Verse 13 onwards. How many of you have read The Dark Night of the Soul? Okay. Desert Fathers. Okay, there's a lot of literature that talks about these dark nights of the soul, which is an expression to say you actually lose your senses, you get into this black hole of lacuna, this emptiness, where you don't find any meaning. There's absolutely no meaning. There's no purpose to life. Now, as I read this, I want us to ask the question, does Job contemplate taking his life? Is he suicidal or not? His wife's asked him. Do you think that he's contemplating suicide in some way to take his life? Well, let's read it. All right, so why Job? Why do you desire Sheol? By the way, let me just mention, Sheol is not hell, technically. Sheol is like the underworld, okay? I don't know how many of you watch J.K. Rowling stuff and all that, but this underworld is this place where everything is just dark and just, not limbo, but no meaning, it's just floating around. And it's just waiting for utter darkness and destruction. Okay, so that's Sheol. It's a horrible underworld place where there is no meaning and value, but it's a state of not experiencing life. Now, why would Job want to be there? Well, he says, I would at least lie down, then I'll have some quiet. He says, you know what, if I was dead and I was in Sheol, I at least have some RIP, rest in. Obviously, he's in torment. He feels tortured, emotionally, physically in pain, with all his relationships. He says, if I die and I'm in this place, at least there I'll be in some kind of a limbo or whatever. I don't know what it is, but I won't experience this pain. Secondly, he says, he said, with kings and counselors of the earth who rebuilt the ruins for themselves, or with princes who had gold and filled their house with silver, or why? Why was I not as a hidden stillborn child, as infants who never have seen the light? There, that's in Sheol, the wicked cease from troubling you, and there the weary are there at rest, even prisoners. Verse 18, even there the prisoners are at ease together. Whoa. And they hear not the voice of a taskmaster. No Pharaoh's whipping them in hell. Not hell in the torment sense, but in this place called Sheol, the underworld. A few things about death I want to mention here. And of course, let's finish by the way, if the first section is cursing with the word let, did you see the number of times he says let? In this section, he asks at least 6 or 7, why? Remember the time you bought your kid a book of whys and more whys? This is Job's operatus moderandi. I mean, now like, why? So you can see he's moved to another section where he's telling you, I'll tell you why I'd rather be in Sheol. Well, apart from the quietness and the peace he thinks he can experience there, he says, well, I won't experience pain and suffering. That'll be the end of life. It is almost like what Buddhists believe. Growing up in India, people in Hinduism and later on Buddhism that came out of Hinduism prayed for some kind of moksha, release from dukkha, the sufferings of life. And of course, Buddhism had another term for it called nirvana. It's not the rock group, but it's the place where you're just blasted into oblivion, into nothingness. You can do that by doing drugs too. No, not really. So, you get into nirvana and you're like, I don't know anything that's happening around me. I mean, Job is actually saying, you know what, if I had gone to Sheol, if this nurse had just dropped on my head and I died, at least I would be dead. I'll be in a place where I don't have to scrape my pain, miss my family, watch these friends in front of me, miserable comforters. The other thing he says is, I won't be bothered. Because right now, Job wants to know why. And I want you to know this, part of being human is that when we suffer, suffering has a way to create thoughtful, reflective questions. Why? And you know what else? We demand an explanation. I want to know. Even if I'm wrong, tell me why. Have you said that? Maybe, but tell me why. I want to know why. This human mind that is always inquiring, if we are not able to understand why, adds to the trauma, the mental torture. I have cancer. I mean, if I knew I was smoking and the smoke filled my lungs and I got lung cancer, okay, at least tell me that. But if I don't know why, that's a form of another torment. You know what I'm saying? So this is where Job is asking the why questions. I just want you to know there's nothing wrong in asking why. As long as we don't demand God to explain himself. That's when you cross sovereignty. You say, how do you know there's nothing wrong in asking why? Because God asked why. You say, what do you mean God asked? When did God ask why?
In the Garden of Gethsemane.
Little after that.
Jesus
on the cross. We're going to come. Yes, Psalm 22, echoed in Matthew 19. Father, Father, why have you forsaken me? I want to submit to us, if you study Judaism, and I had the privilege and honor of taking classes actually to Jerusalem and go through what I call the 3 stations of our Savior's suffering. I start with Gabbatha, the place of the stony hearts, where they whipped Jesus and crucified him. We have no king but Caesar. From Gabbatha, I take them next to Gethsemane. The word Gethsemane in Aramaic means the place of the press. Why is it called Gethsemane? Because olive seeds were what? Crushed. And that's not just figurative. Jesus in that garden, if you've seen The Passion of the Christ, Mel Gibson, that's where he starts the movie, because Satan has crushed him. All the sins of all the world are going to be all on him. He sweats with blood comes out of his pores. But not just Gabbatha or Gethsemane. The ultimate is Jesus on the cross at Golgotha. That place of the skull, cranium, or in Latin, Calvary. Same word. Where he hung. And he says, Father, you know what? I don't know why these Jews, I came to my own. John chapter 1 and verse 11, and my own didn't accept me. Why? I don't know. Maybe I can try to figure that out. I call these disciples, they're all forsaken me. Where is Peter? Why? He said he's going to be with me. Why are these Roman soldiers treating me like a mutilated piece of flesh and still want to poke my side? Why? And then he turns around and said, what I really don't figure out, why have you turned your face from me? What did I do against you? This is why Judaism is more a religion of questions than answers. Brothers and sisters, the reason why God allows us to go through tough times is so that we will struggle with the question. If not, we'll want these flippant answers from, as though God is some cosmic machine. You put a coin and you get the answer. He's sovereign. I know it's a hard kind of a theology to teach, but my understanding, and I haven't suffered as much as many people. I've been in jail once or twice and asked why. But, there are times when I ask, Lord, why? And God may say, why not? I'm the potter. I can do what I want with you, clay. How dare you ask me why? I have a plan. If I don't like the way you're being made, I'll remake you or do what you want. Smash you again. That's what Paul says when he talks about Jews being rejected in Romans 9 onwards. Again, I don't know most of you in the way to explain suffering. I know many of us in this room are going through some form of suffering. J.B. Phillips said it right. If you speak to those who are suffering, you will never lack an audience. I used to have a plaque in my office corridor in India. Be kind. Everyone is hurting in some way. Be kind. God asked 70 whys. Did you know that? In Job. 70 times God asked why. Where were you? What happened? So I asked that question, not just how can I get out, but what can I get out of my suffering? We need an explanation as long as you don't say God owes me an answer. Is this okay? This is a little bit about our understanding God's friendship. He's a friend, but he's not your Starbucks buddy to explain why things happen to you every time something does. He's above and beyond that. Again, some time for questions. I am convinced that pain is not only an eye-opener, it disturbs us, and at the same time, it creates compassion. Again, before I became too much of an evangelical theologian, I used to read a lot about suffering for my My second PhD, when I did that in Oxford, was on suffering. And one of the Latin American Roman Catholic theologians that I really liked was Guterres. And he wrote The Crucified God and Liberation Theology. And his perspective was very interesting. He says when God allows the righteous to suffer, among many other reasons, because he gives them the opportunity to show solidarity with those who are outside his comfort zone. Think about it. David put it this way: before I was afflicted, but now after I've afflicted. The before and after affliction not only opens your eyes to the frailty of this life, because look at the things you're pursuing. Look at the things I'm living for today. Look at the things that upset me. Most of it is temporal. When God takes it away, you realize like what really matters that lasts. I'll give you an example in my life. I have probably about 2,000 to 3,000 books that I've collected over 28 years from at least 3 or 4 different continents. Everywhere I go, I've even taken my baby's diapers out of the bag to put a book. When Dorothy said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I need this book for my research." He said, "You threw the kids' clothes out." You know? I said, "Dorothy, this is an important book. You don't get it in England." You know? Because in those days, remember, luggage was very important and books weigh a lot. So I used to bring these books. Now I teach, and even today, Josh was with me from IVP, and we're just, by October, we are publishing a book. I'm editing a part of it. Do Jews and Christians and Muslims worship the same God? IVP counterpart. But anyway, these people come and they give us books. They're like, here, Dr. We've got 2 books. We like you to review it if you can. If not, recommend it. I've got more books than I need. And I look back and I think, there were times when I threw my kids' clothes out to put 1 book. What am I doing with all these books now? I'm just giving you an honest example when you go through life and you realized those things that you clinched and fought for, and you felt, I'm going to die without this. There are times in life when you say, you know what? It really doesn't matter. What is my point, class? The relational is always more important than anything transactional. Things come and go. Build relationships that last. One of my mentors in India, Atyal, said to me, Gnanakan, work backwards. Find out who's going to be around your coffin and spend time with them. You think about the people we I got a lot of friends on Facebook. How many of them do I turn around when I have a problem? If you take nothing out of this class, focus on things that last. And sometimes suffering, sitting on that ash heap and that garbage dump outside the city, you get a better perspective. Was that all worth it? The amount of energies I spent doing this and that. It's like that little boy who came to his father. He said, Dad, how much do you earn per hour? He said, how dare you ask me these questions, you're a little boy. Mind your business. He said, Dad, I just want to know. So why do you want to? Let's go to your room. So later he felt bad. He went to his room. He said, son, okay, I'm sorry. I was a little busy. You kind of asked me these silly questions. How much you earn per hour? Why do you want to know per hour how much I earn? He said, Dad, how much do you earn? Well, he said, $100. Oh. He said, Dad, can I have $50? Now he's really mad. So what do you mean? You want $50? Why do you want $50? The son looks up and he says, Dad, I saved up money. I've got $50. I thought I'll borrow another $50 so you can spend an hour with me? I thought I can buy an hour with you, Dad, if I had enough money. You know, what lasts is important. One of the reasons I stepped down from being the executive director of an organization is because I realized both my daughters are graduated and there's boys chasing them. And my wife said to me, Gnanakan, they need you now. There may be a time when you need them and they won't need you. That scared me. I don't like my wife, actually. But so, you know, I think in this class, if there's nothing else, remember relationships matter. And pain has a way of showing solidarity with those who hurt in some ways. If not, you and I will be in our comfort zones. You know, life as usual, work as usual, earn another buck. Where are you going to take it? To the grave? You have to leave it behind. You know, the shrouds they have for people who die don't have pockets. Even when you die, you have a ring, they take it out of your hand before they bury you. So you really can't take it with you. Send it ahead. The last part, I just want to leave a few thoughts for us. Pain has a way of blurring reality. We can't think clearly or critically during pain. So what am I saying? When you are in pain, irritable, traumatized for some reason, be still and know that He's God. Don't say something, blast out, and then you regret it. Job will regret it. We'll come to this at the end. He repents, which means he did do something wrong. And these times of suffering raise these dinosaur-like questions. Who in the world knows what this dinosaur Leviathan is? We only know his name those days. It means Rahab, which means the sea monster. But what's that got to do with anything? But there he is. He's raising that question. The other thing I learned from this chapter, death is a great leveler. Isn't it interesting? If you read that section, he says whether you're a king or a prince or a slave, you're all going to have the same what? Death has a way of leveling you out. You're not a boss of anybody in hell. You're going to be all the same. You may be working so hard when these slave drivers whipping you. When they die, you die. Guess what? You're all going to be dead. Again, that makes me think, how do I treat people? How do I treat people? Do I have a one-up over everybody? I think this chapter tells me not only about the brevity of life, but also the futility of human power. What are you going to do with it? You can't wield it in Sheol. Share it. Empower other people while you can. Purposeness and purposelessness. So my conclusion, I like the analogy, and I know some commentators try to use it, but I like to say that Job was looking through the wrong side of a telescope. I did that once. My daughters still laugh at me. I don't know where I was, in some bridge. Was it Brooklyn? Some country, some bridge. You know where you put a coin in that telescope? And I was looking for a toy. And by the time somebody had turned that thing around, and I put this coin and I'm trying to look, and I'm like, this thing doesn't work. And my daughter says, Dad, it's the other way around. All your education, you're so dumb. Looking through the wrong side of the telescope, wondering why I can't see the stars. All right, what's take this home as a great example. I want to use two words that are a little bit theological, don't get thrown off. One is philosophical. Existentialism is a philosophy that examines life the way we experience it with our five senses. We try to make sense of life based on how we feel. It tastes good. It feels nice. I see it's pleasing to my eyes. So we make sense of it because we exist by subjective experience. We experience it and so like, that's good, that's bad. Existentialism. Taken to its end, it can be very futile. What if you don't experience it? What if you have the wrong experience? What if your judgment of it is wrong based on your senses? Can you really trust your senses? The other word I want you to look at is sovereignty. The word sovereignty simply means God is absolutely in charge and totally in control. Let me say that. Simply put, sovereignty means God is what? It doesn't seem like, but He is absolutely in charge and He's totally in control. I was speaking on a radio show this morning. WHCF was recording me. And now they can just call you and record you, put you on the air. So he says, Gnanakan, what is your testimony? Can you give it in just 3 words? That's right. I did actually give him 3 phrases. I said, my testimony is a turtle on a pole in a field. He said, what? I said, a turtle. Have you seen a turtle on a pole in a field? What does that tell you? Well, it tells me 3 things. First thing it tells me, it did not get there by itself. Secondly, it tells me somebody hand took and placed it there. And the third thing it tells me, it was in danger to be mowed down or something and had to be rescued. That's my testimony. I did not get where I am by myself. Grace has led me safe thus far. Through many trials, toils, and snares. You remember that? I have already come. So listen, are you going through trials and toils and snares? It's part of that. But you know what I know? It's the hand of God. I do know one thing. If at all I'm here, it's because of the hand of God. Like the hand of God was on Joseph. In the pit, the hand of God. In Potiphar's house, hand of God. Even in the palace, the hand of God. And I'm so glad if it wasn't for the hand of God, I would have been long lost. I'm literally 1 in a billion Indians. I'm the real Indian, by the way. I hope tonight's lesson has taught you something about God's sovereignty. So I conclude that Job doesn't end his life. Neither does he curse God. He hasn't lost his integrity, nor his faith. We can trust, even when we cannot trace the hand of God. We can always trust the heart of God. Shall we pray? Father, thank you for this evening and our study and this very complicated poetry section that leads us and triggers Job's friends to start talking in the next chapters. Help us, Lord, to take these precious lessons and know that we have such a friend in Jesus. What a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and our griefs to bear. And what a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what peace we often forfeit, what needless pain we bear, all because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. Teach us to pray, Lord. Amen. God bless you and have a great evening.